Well, you're listening to gwot.rocks, God, the World, and Other Things. I'm Kenny Price, your host. Our mission, you got it, advancing equilibrium in the midst of an agitated world. This is season 18, episode 391. This is the audio portion of our YouTube channel show, Other Things With, and this is featuring Other Things with Bennett Moon. It runs for 2 hours. The YouTube channel is normally at least an hour. If the artist or person I'm talking to wants to go further and God's working in the midst of all of that, we'll go further. And so with Bennett, we went for 2 hours, and it was a wonderful time, and I hope that you'll enjoy it just as much as I enjoyed doing this. But this is Other Things with Bennett Moon. Bennett Moon is a modern-day Renaissance woman. She's the Director of Productions and Artist Services at Worldwide Stages, the premier production campus of the world's entertainment industry. And believe it or not, it's located right here in my hometown of Spring Hill, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Nashville, and it's at the southern part of the burgeoning Nashville metropolitan hub. Bennett holds expertise in everything from audio engineering to world tour production management for international musical artists. Her university education, advanced degrees and studies at both the master's degree level, the training in Austria, multiple advanced certifications in sound engineering and reinforcement, coupled with her interpersonal relationship skills and management savvy, places her at the top tier of people in her industry. Her story will encourage and inspire you to be all the best that you can be without excuses or apologies. I also remind you, if you want to see the show in video form, just go to youtube.com/the @ other things with ... So it's youtube.com/the @ other things with ... and that will take you to the home base for the video show. So anyway, without further ado, isn't that such a cliche statement? But without further ado, here's Other Things with Bennett Moon. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to Other Things with Bennett Moon. I'm Kenny Price, your host, and I am so excited to have Bennett on the show today. And I'm going to give a background on her in just a minute. But let me first of all just say, hey, Bennett, welcome to the show.
Honored. Very much. It's a pleasure.
All right. Well, I want to give a little background on how I came to get to know Bennett because it's an interesting journey. We have a new production facility here in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and it's called the Worldwide Stages. And there was talk about this coming, but just as Bennett and I were talking about before coming live, concerned about some municipality needs of improvement. One of them is communication, because there's a nonprofit organization here in Spring Hill called The Well, and they're promoting and doing a good job of it, of a fundraiser that's coming to Worldwide Stages here in Spring Hill. But it said, Michael W. Smith. I thought, well, if they're having Michael W. Smith, it's got to be a venue big enough. And I thought, I don't know of any theaters here in Spring Hill. So I started doing the research on that and found out, the facility opened up 30,000 square feet of production space, both recording and video production. And so then I started looking at, okay, who's running this thing? And that's when Bennett's name came up. And then I started investigating her. So Bennett, tell us what you're doing right now I keep forgetting this, at Worldwide Stages here in Spring Hill.
Well, so it was, a lot of people will remember this. There was a car brand, and it was Saturn, and it was part of the GM family. And they started that in 1988 up in Michigan, right? So then this car brand expanded. They needed a headquarters for it. And what they did was look throughout the nation on where they could put a plant and a headquarters, so that it was kind of the new way that they wanted to do branding of their vehicles, of their family of brand names. And so GM, came down here, built a big factory and put a headquarters. It's 350,000 square feet, 2 stories, basically 7 connected buildings. There is several parts of the headquarters, and it was all in one. It was different than what GM had ever done. And when I say all in one, is that they built this building to be both administrative, all in-house. Everything that every dealer organization had their liaison in this place. The billing, they built an in-house studio. So every car commercial like all the audio recording for any new upgrades that the vehicles would do, that they would send out in CDs to the dealerships. Everything all the way to, like I said, all from the execs all the way up to the people that trained the individuals to go to work on the cars, and then sent them across the highway, which is Beechcroft, basically behind there. It's now just GM did retain the actual major facility of manufacturing that Saturn was, but they offshooted the headquarters of 350,000 square feet, several production of vehicles. So these were warehouses that have varying degrees of internal steel built into them. And that's where they would take, people to train them on every part of the car, from the transmission, the everything about how to work on these cars. They train them there and then send them either, to the plant or somewhere else to do work for these Saturn vehicles. The building, when the fall of the financial crisis happened, GM shut down Oldsmobile and Saturn. They, got rid of those brands. So by 2010, this building was sitting empty. And it basically sat empty since 2010 until Spring Hill did, when it was growing so much in the early 2010s, they thought, hey, we could bring all of our city board, the board of elders and aldermen and the mayors and all that, the police station, they were all going to bring it all under one roof and put it in this building. So Spring Hill bought it. Then they couldn't get it going because there's so much infrastructure that needed to be upgraded, and it was costing basically the same as them just building their own police stations, their own libraries, their own city halls, and everything kind of sunk again. And so about 2015, 2016, it was mostly 80% empty. And that's when it went into disrepair. Obviously that's a huge building to maintain, and in comes some, angel investors, it's called Valiant Family Wealth Management Corporation, which is a group of very wealthy people that like to see their money be used in the entertainment world, whether that is, in production or actual, software, hardware, and a couple of like celebrities, local and international, but celebrities that have called Middle Tennessee home. So that was an amazing opportunity for these two founders, Mark Long and Shane Ellis, to also acquire the help of a lawyer from Nashville named Kelly Frey, who is still the current CEO. And those three guys said, we're going to do this, and they needed people to help run it. And I, through many ways, I connected in 2020. They really bought it in 2021. And in 2020, I had actually toured the building and met Shane and Mark Long. And Shane Ellis and I actually went to the same engineering school, and 20 years apart, but we had known each other in that way and connected. And I was living in Georgia still, and I had always grown up, I'd grown up here. I'm still very connected to the area, even if I did maintain a career that got me across the world many times and kept me gone a lot. But I kind of always knew that I was looking forward to seeing how I might either come locally to Nashville or, even Columbia. So that was how it all came to fruition, because they said, hey, we need a director of production. We need someone to help us take this car manufacturing facility, and we need to make it into a production facility. And during the pandemic, I had been working a lot in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta as well. And so I had been working, because that was some of the only things that were post-production work was being done during a lot of the shutdown, is that the movies like Marvel television and all those, they were, as long as you were vaccinated, you could go back to work because they were deemed, some of those shows were, being able to keep small sets. But so I was working already down there for film and television, and which was a wonderful experience for me, because I'd been mostly doing, live music, live, like touring, recording, and audio and live entertainment and system buildings for arenas. So it was an amazing opportunity for me to do it. So when I was doing that for a year, and then they said, hey, would you come up here? Because we want to make this basically everything I had touched on so far in my career, which it was such a blessing. And it was in my home county, right? Murray County, I thought maybe I'd work in Nashville, but it was just an amazing opportunity. And I accepted it. And so since 2021 up until about it took, oh man, it's a big building. So it took a long time to determine what parts of those big warehouse rooms were going to be what we use for production sound stages, and how to convert those on, appropriate, still doing supply chain issues, right? Like the amount of black paint that we needed, because that's what you really need when you have black paint, that's what you need as a soundstage. You really just need, and if you look at most of the venues like arena or theaters, unless it's the beautiful theaters of times past, like the vaudeville theaters that are intricately decorated with, plaster of Paris. But for the most part, any newly built, whether it's an arena, shed, amphitheater, or redone small theater, they're going to be all in black. And the amount of paint we needed, it just took so long. And so it took about 2 years, from 2021 to 2023, beginning of it, to get that work done. But now there are several sound stages, and they have bought, or they acquired during the sale of it, the 22 acres around the building too. So the funding is going, again, you've probably seen some of the signs about, investing in it, is that really that's what it is. It's that instead of taking these buildings that we have been blessed to have and converted them, but they're still not purpose-made sound stages. So could it be better? Oh yeah, always. So how to get there? It takes money. So what I've been doing recently is really making sure that after the build has happened and the renovation or the rebuild of what was there into a soundstage, and that conversion of the production of manufacturing facility to a production facility is maintaining the acts and the artists and the productions, whether it be music, events, television series. We had a wonderful opportunity to work with Reese Witherspoon with her Hello Sunshine Company. They did a series with Casey Musgraves, My Kind of Country, which aired on Apple TV. Netflix has come in and done things. Nicole Kidman shot her part of the movie that I guess might come out later this year. I think it's a horror sci-fi film, not sci-fi, but I think like eerily, not horror, but it's called Holland, Michigan. And so Nicole Kidman spent a lot of time shooting her post-production work there. And most recently, I'd say I have to, give a lot of credit to CMT. CMT has, these syndicated TV shows. You have Storytellers, you have CMT Crossroads, and then you have some specials, right? The CMA Awards and CMT Awards, and the CMT Viacom, which is like the bigger brand, the major. Viacom owns everything from like Comedy Central all the way to, CMT and then BET and all those. So CMT has used us consistently for the productions of what they have for Storytellers and Crossroads. So we've had Darius Rucker. We did what was the last one? Guns, Poison, not Axl Rose. My goodness. Bret Michaels from Poison.
Oh man, Bret Michaels.
Yeah, did a crossover. And then, Brooks and Dunn, and we had Thomas Rhett and Thomas Rhett and when not Kelly Clarkson, I'm blanking on it, but they did a country and a pop crossover. And Carrie Underwood is one of the investors, and so she has shot all of her Rhinestones album music videos, shots. We've been really lucky to have both, television, TV, music come together in this place. We're still learning. We're still like very much a new facility and learning how we can actually, we were very worried about how to open up to the public. That was, the infrastructure we're not really a venue, right? Like we're not trying to sell tickets on a daily basis to come to our place. Like we want it to be more so the working place for individuals in the music industry to come and do their thing. And because otherwise you are looking at Nashville, where you have, Bridgestone Arena has the annex there where a lot of people do their prep and their stuff. But this area, the main thing when you think about, if some people don't think about it, and that's okay because they're not on the pulse of how shows are done. But when you're talking about an arena show, you can't put on an arena show unless you rent out an arena to put it up and practice it. And that's just money out of the artist's pocket, aka whoever also paid the artist to do the tour, Live Nation, AEG, the labels, whatever it is that, that is you. If you're renting out Bridgestone, you're not only just paying for the space, you're paying for all of the concessions that of the time that people cannot put sports events there, right? So there is a scale that you are just paying out of pocket as an artist to put on your show just to be safe, to hang millions of pounds above your head so that it doesn't come crashing down. And ideally, there needs to be more facilities that are just there for this purpose, that do not have and hopefully the idea is that if there are purpose-built places for this, then the ticket sales can hopefully start to be leveled out, because a lot of these ticket sales, they're just recouping what they had to pay for to keep the Predators, or, if it's another city, the LA Kings or whatever it is, out of these.
Hang on, let me say the Predators is a sports team, okay? I mean, people watching here.
Yes. Hockey is done at one of the biggest, I'd say, in downtown Nashville indoor arenas, and that's Bridgestone Arena, and that is where the Predators play. And now we have a Send Amphitheater also in Nashville, but that's a shed. So at this time of year, it's not ideal to either do a show nor practice a show. So these are, you have War Memorial, but I mean, this is a common story on any major city, is that you really you have competition of what is there to be able to hold the weight of your shows, which we're talking millions of pounds. Everybody loves a good, when they're watching Taylor Swift and Beyonce and these big, beautiful tours that they've done, those IMAGs, just the IMAGs around them have to be on movers. They're being held and floated and brought up and down by motors. All of that is weight, and that weight is steel and iron, and that weight takes a lot of structure to be able to hold those. And that's just not built regularly. It needs to be purpose built, and there's just not enough of them. And that is our idea at Worldwide, is to provide that. But because of the building has so many offices and other administrative built buildings that was there from the use of what it was built for, which was a whole headquarters, we also have the ability to have, lockups and storage for the artists when they get off a tour. That's a big thing too. Where do you put your stuff? Like, a lot of people don't think about that. The artist, when you take down your Christmas decorations, everyone is always, I know I do. I don't even, at a certain point, I haven't bought a new, Christmas decoration in a long time. But I swear, when I put them up, don't you feel like you just somehow have more, and you don't know, you're buying a new plastic box to put it in, and you're trying to find it in a different place in your garage to put it. So, these artists are not putting all of that stuff at their houses and their garages. And also, if the things are custom built, they're not going back to the vendors. Some of the stages are custom made for some of these artists. So you have to store them because you can reuse a lot of them. If they're smart, you reuse them. When I was on the Jack tour, we reused a bunch of things. We did have purpose-built things for the look and for the impact of the difference between each tour. However, there's certain things like, that you do keep around, and where do you put them? So another big aspect of what Worldwide will do and has done is having storage for artists, for not just, but for the artists, but for the vendors, the staging companies, the lighting companies, the cabling companies, I know that 4/0 and 2/0 cable, which for the listeners are the huge shielded bound black cables that you might see people, walking over on stage. They're about the between a silver dollar size and they that weight is it's a lot of cabling, because that's how you get to front of house all the way to the stage. And if you got a big enough arena, you're taking all that cabling with you, and it matters on how you can get in and out with a semi truck. And that is what also we in Nashville, Cowan Street, which is where Oracle bought. They have sound check there. They have a lot of amazing vendors that our industry use, but Oracle bought all that and wants to kind of use that area as its headquarters. So a lot of those people are having to move, and so we welcome them down here at Worldwide, and we just want to make it different. We want it to be different as well. We've done a lot of work with making the spaces comfortable and beautiful, because a lot of the crew of all of these productions are sometimes the afterthought, right? Where do they hang out for 4 hours while where does all the crew hang out while the lighting department figures out why one bulb is not coming on? You have to have places like that. And it's also safe to get them out from underneath the things that people are working on. So to have these back green rooms, these beautiful spaces, these comfortable places for not only the crew, but the artist, the band to be in. That's really important about the vision of what Worldwide wants to do.
And let me say that we may have said this already, but you're the director of productions and artist services for the whole facility. And because of my background, I'm grabbing a lot of what you're saying, and looking online. Once I found out the facility exists, the photographs that you guys are putting up on the web to show just how beautiful it is. And I'm an architecture buff, and so the interior architectural approach is really nice. And I think something that people can relate to. It's funny, when you see people, even like the old rockers like Paul McCartney and Mick Jagger, that everywhere they go, they set up, it's almost like a Bedouin tent, in the backstage, so they can have something that they feel comfortable with in the midst of a big, shed.
The vibe. It's important. It's very important.
Well, you saying that, boy, man, there's so many things I want to ask you. And if you have to run, let me know at what point.
No, I'm here. You were patient enough for me.
But I tell you, because let's kind of go back, but, definitely want to, it's fascinating to me that you work with Jack White. I don't want to talk about that right now, but I'm a huge fan of Jack White, and it goes way back. Before I forget about it, I will say the first time I ever heard his name, I'm watching the Grammys, and Loretta Lynn, a country artist, has an album that's up for a Grammy nomination, and they say, Jack White is producer of the year for the Loretta Lynn album. And I'm like, okay, this young guy comes on stage. I thought, wait, who is this young guy? And why is he producing Loretta Lynn? How does that even happen? And all of a sudden I'm hearing Jack White, Jack White, Jack White. So anyway, there's that fascination there. I found out, and I've shared this on the show before, but he produced, what's her name? Queen of Rockabilly. For the life of me, I can't remember her name at the moment. Wanda Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
But Wanda Jackson, for a time, came to our church in Euless, Texas. She used to sit next to me, and I didn't know. I just thought she was an old country artist. I didn't know that, she hung out with Elvis. And anyway, but then, he produced her in her late 80s. So that's a whole nother story. But let's take it back to the beginning a little bit, because your education, I think, is really interesting, and something that you shared in our texts, but going back and forth, is that if there's anything you could do to be an inspiration to other girls, to women, and I know all the sensitivity about gender specifics and all that, but at the same time, I'm a grandfather. I've got 4 grandchildren so far. One of the sons is planning on having a couple more, but the first grandchild is a girl. And she's very artistic, very creative, very good with her hands and drawing. Um, and, I want to see her excel. But when you have someone like you come on the scene to where, and I was reading in the article you sent me, I guess it's from a magazine out of Columbia.
Yeah, it was Murray County Living, I think.
Murray County Living, yeah, Conversation with Bennett Moon by Alyssa Perry. But you point out that in a field where there's a limited amount of women or females, and I want to see it change, because there's no reason why there can't be more. In the drum world, my son's a pro drummer, a producer, a writer for Sony, Essential Music. But I keep encouraging him, start her on the drums. Sheila E. is an amazing drummer. The woman, I don't know her name, but she drums for, how can I forget his name? Kid Rock, And so I was inspired by a friend of mine who was on one of the first episodes we've done of this show. And I asked her about any sense of a corporate glass ceiling. And she made an interesting comment. She said, I don't know anything about that. She said, because from my first job, which is a teacher, she said, I've always been self-employed. I've had my own business. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that's the idea, is to where, you make your own way. And obviously you're doing it. So let's go back, because your education, I think, really plays in. Because, some people get into the music industry, the entertainment industry, the production industry, and maybe they don't have the schooling, but you actually are educated. You just didn't grow up in a garage band. So tell me a little bit about your path educationally, because I think I know I read somewhere, I can't find it now, but evidently, did you go to school in Europe for a time?
I did.
So let's kind of go back to the beginning, and we don't need to drag this out, but I just think it's fascinating that your degrees and how that is all playing together now, that's equipped you to be able to do all this. So
yeah, I often, I know that, and I say this all with a caveat, there are so many people that have been so successful that did it without any sort of, degree. And that's important. It is also important. And in my life, like I loved to learn, sometimes school was just school, but I loved to learn. And I knew that if I wanted to set myself up to not make things harder than they already had to be. And I think a lot of it also is that, everyone is gifted, and some people just have not seen the way that their gifts shine. And to figure out how to, dust off what is inside everyone about what they have to be able to honor and to give and to ignite and to fuel that. I was really lucky to have a family that, made sure that I knew. I mean, they wanted me to excel. Obviously, every parent, I think, wants their children to do right. But I mean, it wasn't an absolute, in the sense that, like, I had to do this path, but the wherewithal of knowing and being empowered to know that, like, okay, hey, I did get some scholarships, and I went to a really small school. Like I graduated with 28 people, and I'd say five, actually not I'd say, I know exactly 5 of those people I'd been with since I was 3 years old. And 14 of those 28 people I had been with since I was in about 4th or 5th grade. My world was this big. And for me, I wanted to just love where I come from, but I wanted to also experience more. So I chose to go someplace where I didn't know anybody. I was a freshman of 9,000 kids at the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. And that I had toured, I had many scholarships at other schools, and I had toured over 11. I applied to 25 schools and got into all of them. And I toured 11, and Georgia was my last one. And it was that moment that I had always hoped for, that some people never get it. And I didn't know if I was, but when you walk on a campus and you can't see yourself anywhere else. And that was how Georgia was for me. But it had a lot to do with the music in that town that is Athens, Georgia. I mean, B-52s, REM, Widespread Panic, Drive-By Truckers, Of Montreal, the country artists that have come out of there. It's an amazing hub of musicians. And I knew, like I had been people, had known I was going there. They had sent me all this stuff and I was enthralled. And I knew that they had both academics and music there. And I didn't know, to be honest, that I would do music. I knew that I was good at math and I knew I was good at people. I'm not, I can say that, yes, it's a blanket term to say you're a people person, but truly, I think that, and I think it's important to figure that out within oneself, is that it's not just that I'm a people person, because there are plenty of people that can work with other people well, but they don't necessarily think that they either, one, take joy from it, and two, it's enjoyable, right? So I can truly say that I enjoy people, and I enjoy as much about what makes people different, and where I have to pull different parts of me that maybe have been rusty or I haven't had to pull to work with those people, because they are different. They might be, begrudgingly doing something, but then you went, like you find that thread that y'all are, that, oh, okay, I know, I think I know how, or maybe even through talking, with that confidence to have a conversation with somebody about how they'd like something to go. But I truly do enjoy people. And so going to Georgia, I did do business. And I coupled it with a music business degree. So I had to take a ton of music classes as well as complete my business. And I can tell you that business was just what I knew that I wanted to have, because the degree, even then, doesn't really necessarily dictate, unless you're a doctor, what you're going to do. And I just knew that 4 years, just get the degree, Bennett, just complete that. And that allowed me, knowing that I had a degree done, and I still went on to grad school for engineering after that, but I knew that I just wanted to just have that in my back pocket, so that I felt like I could take chances in life, because if I failed, hey, I got a business degree. I can go to work pretty fast, because I could do, and any sort of business would essentially be able to hire me, because I just did the work. I just got the paperwork. And in some ways, I hate to say that, because that's exactly why some people don't want to go to school, because they know that it sometimes doesn't matter. And it's true. However, for me, my confidence to take risks exponentially rose, because I knew I had a parachute, no matter if I failed or not. And so that was my path to that, and why I did the schooling I did. And while I was in school, I knew I was thinking about basically going into the music industry. I wanted to know what I wanted to have parts of what wasn't going to be easily accessible here in the States. And there was a program. I was in a youth symphony. I grew up playing the flute and the piano. Thank you, Granny. I didn't do it more than anything other than knowing how to read music and knowing how important music is for so many ways. But I also went to Austria and to study at Innsbruck, but it's basically Salzburg, Vienna, and Innsbruck. And Vienna has some of the most amazing opera houses in the entire world. And of course, any of the other major cathedrals that were built in Europe, those acoustics. And so I really wanted to go there to study acoustics, which is science and it's math, basically. So I to study those buildings and architecture, and to know how those buildings play, and the ways that those buildings were built to help sound carry throughout a room. In some of those cathedrals, no matter how big they are, you can whisper on stage. And there's actually some theaters here built in the US, for especially the ones in the vaudeville era. There are remarkable theaters built here in the US that you can whisper on stage or talk at a very low conversational tone, and you can be in the far balcony and you're going to be able to hear them, because of the way that the building and the way, and even without science as technical and technology was back then, they, through trial and error, they knew how to build beautiful places that carried sound without electricity. And so that really rose my wherewithal to, like, all right, when you finish your undergrad, what do you want to do, Bennett? And
Now, how old were you when you went to Austria then? Because you grew up in Colombia, correct?
well, I actually am. I'm really young. I'm very young because I actually went. I skipped a grade when I was younger, and so at the beginning of my freshman year of college, I was 17, and I graduated in 4 years. I did have. Don't worry for people that. I mean, I had to take summers. I mean, sometimes you just got to figure out. And I changed from international business to a couple other degrees. So to finish in 4 years, I did have to take summer school, Maymester. So don't worry too much that if you want to graduate in 4 years and not 5, you can. No shame in having to like go back to school during your summer. But I was able to graduate at age 21, and before graduating, I had applied to the National Music Conservatory, and they had granted me a scholarship to go to the recording workshop, which is it's mainly in Ohio, and then they also give you like residencies at other studios all over the U.S. So I was able to go to LA, I was able to go to Texas, and to Austin, to New York, and to kind of go to these studios that were a part of the program to help young engineers know how, one, just a seat in the room. And then two, I was lucky enough at that time that would have been in 2000, the fall of 2011. I was 21 and just fresh graduated in May. And 2011, going back to Jack White, right? Like, 09, 10, that's the research, like the reemergence, not the surge, but just the reemergence of vinyl, right? That was 08 and 10, basically. People started putting their digitally recorded albums of the 90s, early 2000s. They started taking what they had done and printing them to big vinyls because they were pieces of art. After that, and Jack was right there. Jack White, that savior of so many things, so much of the art that is lost sometimes, and how much work he has done to secure it at his own expense a lot of the times, and at naysayers' expense. But he's not been wrong, and he wasn't wrong. And so he brought his Third Man Records pressing company, and at that time he was actually using other pressers like United and whatnot to do his albums, but he had the vision, and he saw it, and he knew it was going to be worth it. So after the vinyl started, just people were like, oh, this is really cool. I like having this, not CD, but this vinyl. And then that's when the art, the true like nitty gritty of it comes into play. And I was in school right at that perfect time. And I mean, Malcolm Gladwell is an author. I mean, some people, Outliers, like, what is it? David and Goliath. There's Outliers.
The tipping point.
Tipping point. He speaks a lot about this, that I say that because I have been so blessed. I have worked hard, but I have been so blessed, just like Malcolm Gladwell will point out, that sometimes it is about embracing where you are and seeing how what's happening and what you could actually be a part of, instead of just striving and digging down and like, this is what I want to do. Like, what is happening? And I was blessed to be in that time where I was seeing this resurgence of vinyl. And also in Athens, Georgia, where I had interned before I had graduated undergrad, was a place called Chase Park Transduction Studios, owned by David Barbie, Andy Lemaster, and that studio, especially on the Eastern Seaboard, is has one of the largest collections of tape machines. We're talking about Atari, 3M, Studer. These are machines that have just gathered dust. And this is, I mean, common story across so many studios, whether it's a big one or a small one, home studios or not. People, once the box, aka the computer, came into play, Pro Tools, you don't need to house these huge, basically, like these huge cabinets with these reels on top. And, tape is expensive. Tape, tape is so simple, but it's expensive. And so they just, people moved away from them, the 90s, 2000s, early 2000s. And I had interned there at Chase Park Train Junction. So I had seen some of these, and David Barbie and some of the engineers at Chase Park, they still used tape. There were still artists like Drive-By Truckers, Patterson Hood, God bless him, has never, really, even if he recorded some of the tracks, like, if you need 30 takes of one song, or whether you have, a whole orchestra that you're recording. So you'd need most of the tape machines, they're going to be you mix on you mix on a stereo 2-track, but you have 8-track, 16 tracks, 16, 24, 48, 64, depends on your board, right? If you have an MCI board, you have a huge fader board, right? You can bus different channels, but really, truly, it comes down to being able to track what you want. And sometimes it was a mix of it. So as an intern and then as an assistant engineer, I was really blessed to be able to see that you can maybe record the album, do the dubs and do and get the meat of it. And then after you've tweaked it in the box, send it through the tape machine just to get the beautiful compression that happens within a tape machine is incredible. It's you can look on YouTube, they can show you on the wavelengths, but there's about it's a compression that happens, that it's why when you hear those trumpet sounds on a Count Basie record, or the Etta James singing that trill in her voice, and on a vinyl record, or even as you're hearing it on Spotify, it was still recorded in this fashion. And that is just something that most algorithms and plugins and Pro Tools, they do a good job of it. It's just still incredible to do it the way that it was done originally. And so I started before I had entered engineering school, I had worked on these tape machines, seen how they worked, and they were just churning in my head. And as soon as I had done the meat of what audio engineering is, I continued on to get certifications. I got sound for motion picture, sound for game audio. So doing Foley effects, like the way, whenever you play a video game and you hear, you punch a guy and it's like, ugh, it's like, or you drop something. All those have to be recorded and planted into the game. And so somebody has to record them to give them to the designer to put them in the game. I did, after I realized I had done so much engineering work in signal flow, I came out of that knowing what? I think that people are going to be buying these records. And at that same time, people actually don't want their digitally recorded, or they might want to see what it's like to record the whole process analog. And I needed to also pay off grad school, and I needed to do any work I could. I was at that point, after the year, I was 22, 23. I looked like a...
No, wait, stop. So at 22, 23, you'd finished a grad school?
Mm-hmm. I did systems engineering and audio engineering, and I went on to do my certifications in game for motion, audio for motion picture, audio for game systems, and advanced sound systems. I started doing speakers. I started to, I worked for companies or interned for companies while in grad school on how to, build massive sound arrays.
Okay. So what we see here is that Bennett definitely falls into the classification of a
nerd.
An overachiever. I would call it a superachiever. Let's use that terminology. I think that's better. But also the fact that by that age, you have an engineering degree in sound. Mm-hmm. So, without going too far back, I want to keep the story moving forward. But at what point did you realize you had an interest in the scientific, not really mechanical, but it is in a sense of sound mechanics? Mm-hmm. When did you, because you talked about your parents being an encourager of, putting your foot in the door, going for it. But was there something that clicked where you go, wait, this makes sense to me?
Yeah. And I want to be careful on how I say this, because it is, I don't know how else out of it to say it, is that I knew you spoke about women, right? And I'll just be very honest. I was 23 and I looked the way I do. I knew, and it's not anything like I say that, and I truly, it's not, I'm not angry, and I was never angry about it, truly, because one, I was so young, but I knew that there was no way that I was going to be hired for what I was doing, which is to make rock and roll records, unless I earned my place, because I look like this. I mean, it doesn't matter about looks. And that's why I'm very careful about saying it, but I'm not ignoring the fact that I wasn't coming off as somebody that would be hired to make, the next Red Hot Chili Peppers record, right? Because I was too bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And I knew that. And I also honored that I didn't need to change. That's what is, I might feel bad about saying that, like, I didn't succumb to that, but I almost just owned it. If that's any way to say it. And if you want, like on advice on women, like I have a ton of it. I owned where I was at in my career. And I wasn't upset that people always thought I was the girlfriend immediately. I was the girlfriend of the band, or I was the merch girl.
Oh, I'm saying, okay. I'm getting what you're saying then.
Does that make sense?
So in the room, they don't see you as the technologist or the scientist. Yeah. They see you as someone who's tagging along.
Exactly. Taking up space, really.
But as a young girl, were you like taking Lego sets or engineering? I know that's mechanical, but I'm saying, but there's something.
Yeah.
Because you're passionate about what you do, what you know. And I think to know it at the level you do, there has to be a passion. And so that's been in you from the beginning.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too bogged down on that, but to me, it's fascinating.
I'll tell you one thing, exactly what I learned a lesson early on. And it hurt when I heard it, because it was from somebody that I really respected. But I'm so glad he said it to me. And he is a mentor to this day. And I respect him. Is that he said, sometimes, Bennett, someone is going to ask you what time it is, and you automatically sometimes reply with how a clock works. And truly, what I had to work on as a person is how to differentiate between where that's okay to talk about how a clock works, and maybe that actually benefits the conversation, but also just make sure that you tell them what time it is when they need it. Answer the question. So I very much, yes, I have had that brain for a very long time, but it's the curiosity part. It's really the curiosity part. And turning off sometimes the person, like, again, I am a dual, I have so much people person, and then I shut that off, and people are like, man, you it's not like a flip, but it's like I will zone out and not have anybody talk to me, or just not answer, or just not do anything other than just like dig into something. And you have to do that when you're in this career.
So, okay. So early on, so you get your graduate degree early in sound engineering, then you go to Austria and you study actually sound more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you come back to the States. And so let's pick up there. Then what happened when you actually?
I went back, Chase. I went back actually to the place that I had interned at originally in undergrad, which was Athens, Georgia, Chase Park Transduction Studios. It's an incredible place, and it's not flashy. It's actually the antithesis probably of what Worldwide Stages looks like. It is just a facility that is blessed with so much old gear that has been maintained because of the owners and the studio managers there, and because it has been a place that has continuously had business. It's a sad thing to have seen over the years some beautiful studios close down because they just can't keep the competition of what somebody can do in their bedroom. People stopped paying to come into a studio because, this kid down the street, took his daddy's money and put in a $5,000 sounds, a computer and soundproofing, and I'm going to go record my hip hop album there. That's what happened. And this Chase Park Transduction Studios was able to survive through that, and still to this day. And they had a job waiting for me, and I was there's just not a lot of female engineers. I think at the time when I really started to stop, to stop my like learning, like going and getting more certifications, because I was trying to like weigh out like, all right, if I'm not going to be able to really get booked to do what I'm learning to do, then I'm just going to keep learning how to do more. Like, so that's why I kept doing the certifications for, sound promotion picture and all that. And so I stopped doing that, and they had a job waiting on me. And to be honest, I went to undergrad there. So I knew I was broke, so broke. I needed another job on top of doing what I was going to, or what I went to school to do. And knowing Athens as the town, I knew where to get the $2 lunches. And I was like, all right, I can do this. I can move back there, and I can, and there's a theater there. There's a music venue there called the Georgia Theater. It's incredible. And I knew, I was like, well, hey, I want some live sound, experience as well. I don't want to just get paid, because I was getting paid to just fix things too. I was taking any job I could. So people would send the studio these like little 8 tracks or big machines. And it is mind-numbing work. I'll be honest, I did the work that nobody else wanted to do. And that is what helped me to this day get to where I am. Because Jack White or Third Man Records had sent, they needed people, the tiny, like down to the tiny screws in some of these 1960s tape machines. You don't make them they aren't made anymore. So what happens is that you can buy up old broken ones, but parts of those old broken ones still work. So I would take those old broken ones that are just unrepairable, and I would take them all apart, get all the little pieces out, file them, and then sell them on eBay for like the company, or to help other people fix things. And so, just a little, we haven't gotten there yet, but that is really truly how I got connected with Third Man Records and Jack, and also through some touring stuff, is that I have a name that you remember, Bennett Moon. And I remember didn't know who it was for, but I had coming back home for Christmas one time. They were like, oh, you're going to Tennessee. Well, this big machine, we were going to ship it. Can we'll pay you to hand deliver it. And I was like, yeah, like I'm going that way anyway. It's actually safer at that time, I think I was driving a Honda Civic, like it was actually safer in my car than putting it on a UPS truck and shipping it. So at that time, when I got back to Athens, I just took any job, because even when I did start to finally get credit enough and expertise being the assistant engineer, which I also give David Barbie so much credit for giving me a chance to be in the room with these stars, with these incredible, with like some major artists that, they're like, oh, and I would meet their management teams, and in Athens, it's a college town. I was able to go to these like, divey music venues, like, 30 people in the room, and just like go listen to a show and be like, here's my card. I was like, I can get you a really good deal. If you want to lay 2 tracks down, I'll make it happen. Like I worked for free. Like there was times where I just got them to pay the studio, like for the power and the time. And I did my own work. I did it for free, because you have to start somewhere. You have to. And so that's, I got to fit into the schedule by working at Chase Park. And then I started working at Georgia Theater, started doing just stage management, helping when the load ins and the load outs happen, and understanding like how that part of the whole music thing is, like how semi trucks are packed, or how monitor engineers are different than front of house engineers, and how all of that signal flow plays into what's happening when you see a live production. And I did that for a couple, and that's kind of what I did. And even on top of that, I used my business degree. Again, you never know how you're going to use some of the things that you put into, but these bands there was a lot of bands that come out of Athens, and Moon Taxi actually is a Nashville band, but it was managed out of Athens. And what they did is that they would send all their merchandising receipts, and they'd do all their online sales. And so when I couldn't get people to record during the day, because artists don't get up before noon, like the old saying or whatever, but so I would go to work from like 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. at a management group, like a label. And all I would do is use my business degree and make spreadsheets about what the sales for these artists after they gave me the receipts. and they'd pay me they'd pay me hourly. I think I did everything I could within the industry that I could to try to figure out where I might fit.
Well, I tell you, so what the story about the Honda Civic with the gear. So was that going to Jack?
He was going to, essentially, yeah.
Third Man Records?
Yeah, Third Man Records, yeah.
We were there.
My tag, it had my, it had my sign off. Like I signed everything I fixed. And so it had my name in there, Bennett Moon.
And they found out, I was following him when he sent some record. You remember when he sent it into outer space on a turntable? And then one of his tech guys that also keeps like all of his antique gear that's in the Third Man, probably in both locations, the one here in Nashville. But that's amazing. I guess we were in town visiting. We didn't live here yet, right? And, so I took my family down to Third Man Records. Because I remember when he released the video, the vinyl that he did, and you remember the guys that they had on the motor scooters and they went driving off, and I'm thinking they're out in the middle of somewhere, and I didn't realize it's like right downtown.
Yeah.
So we get there, and it's just somebody's jamming out inside, and he had to be there because it was the 7th anniversary of Third Man Records, and they had security and all this. I thought, well, I've been here before. There was none of this, and so there was this woman at the door, and I think she's actually in the other group, not the Raconteurs, that he toured with.
That was Allison Moss.
Yeah, she looked familiar.
Yeah.
But they had her in a security guard outfit, and I said, "Is he here?" Well, hey, thank you so much for coming today. And she wouldn't answer my question, but they were rocking out. But we just happened to be there, but I didn't get to go back in the warehouse area.
What a cool time to be there.
Yeah, it was fun, but that is amazing. So I'm just fascinated because I see this entrepreneurship to where you're taking gear, breaking it down, and selling stuff on eBay. That is very inspirational. It's a small thing, but just all of these layers of things you're doing to make things happen for yourself. Okay, so you're back. You're working at the studio in Athens, and so let's pick up there and kind of move forward.
So I made some records I was really proud of. By that point, it would have been 2015, 2016. And I had mentioned that I had been working managerial wise for a label. So GT Music Group. And they had several artists on their group, on their roster, Moon Taxi probably being one of the bigger ones. And I had just finished being the assistant engineer on Patterson Hood from Drive By Truckers, her solo record, Heat Lightning Rumbles in the Distance. And then I had done Drive By Truckers, Go-Go Boots and The Big To Do, which is a dual album that they did. And so I had just, really felt like I got some good credit on, and my discography.com is worthless. I need to update it, but I had known that I had made a difference, and I was really working at the Georgia Theater and being at that point, 2016, I was also doing monitor. I had like kind of picked up shifts doing monitors, and I was like doing live sound and, outside of getting people in the studio, because the studios cost a lot of money. It does cost a lot of money to record songs professionally, right? Like at a professional place. Moon Taxi kind of had their first tour bus, one of their first tour bus tours, and they needed crew. And I had already been taking care of them, financially with their records of their merchandise and expenses. And they just, they needed crew. And at that point, it was 2016, and I kind of just looked at myself. I was 26 or something like that. I think 26, 27. And I just said, 26. I was like, well, if I'm going to go out on the road, I knew that, there's other things in my life that I knew I would want to do, but going out on tour is also a vacuum of your time and a disruptor of what you might be on a path doing. But it also is a huge opportunity to learn things that you really cannot learn, even if it's the same beast. It's sound, it's sound that you got to, but when you apply that at a different venue every night and advancing shows, and you are learning the crowds and you are going across the nation, it's just a whole experience. And I knew I wanted to do it. And I got that opportunity, very blessed and thankfully, with a band that has my same last name. You know, you can't make this stuff up. Like the band existed outside of me before I even worked with them, because they all met at Belmont in Tennessee, but yet I was working for them in Georgia through their management. And then, you know, that whole thing, they needed crew for this tour bus tour. And they were like, "Do you want to do it, Bennett?" And I was like, "You know what? I do."
Awesome. So you assembled the crew
Mm-hmm.
and then went on tour, and then were you like the production manager or?
Well, yeah. Well, no, not originally. I was still the youngest person there. I was probably 25, 26, I think. And so they had from their previous tours, like their Sprinter van tours, they had already a front of house, and they didn't have a monitor engineer, but they also didn't, at that point, they weren't playing venues that needed their own sound monitor engineer. They just used the venues because it's basically free, right? So I was like stage managing. I was doing all of like everything and settling the shows and doing the hospitality and not selling the merch. Like I didn't sell the merch, but I'd have to do the counts because, you know, venues have splits. So like they take, you know, 20% of all the soft goods, and usually 20 to 30% of the soft goods, and 10% of the hard, which is like vinyls or music or whatnot. And you have to settle all of that, even if it's 3 a.m. You cannot leave the venue without paying the venue their due. And so I was the business person.
Well, wait, I've been around, you know, and grew up in music personally and all, you know, so I did not know this. So when you said settle the tour, you literally, like the night before you left, you had to pay them? Like you
had to pay them your merch. Correct. They
like you write them a check?
It's cash. So I had to keep a bank. So basically anything, if I didn't have enough cash sales to pay the percentage, then I had to just go into the per diem cash that I had on hand to pay the crew every day and the band every day. So
I did not know that. And I think it's funny you use the term Sprinter, and we don't realize this, that there are probably some big, you know, pretty sizable names that still don't travel with tour buses because of the expense. Mm-hmm. And so it was a big deal then for the group you're working with to go from the Sprinter vans to the tour bus.
Making it.
Okay, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut off, but no. I was just shocked that, so here you are literally carrying around a wad of cash and giving these people that run those venues their pay. That reminds me of, what is the guy's name? They call him Super Mensch. He represents all the stars. Shep Gordon.
Yeah. Yes.
And he said that one of the things, you know, when he went into town, he had, you know, no experience of any kind, but obviously very gifted at that. And but him talking about the one thing that he was capable of doing that he brought home every night was also getting paid before he left, and some of the things that he would stimulate in order to bring about them paying the artists, you know, what they were supposed to get. So that's fascinating. So, okay, keep going.
Yeah. So I worked with Moon Taxi from touring. I started working, like I said, working administratively with them, managerially about 2014. So about 2 years went by and I was still making records and working at the Georgia Theater, doing live sound and making rock and roll records. And then 2016 hit, I go out on tour and I tour with them all the way through. Basically on my off time too, I always went back to Athens. I still had my house there. And I had thankfully a roommate that took care of my animal and, you know, made sure I had a place to come back to. That, you know, when you collapse off tour, you just need a place to decompress. And so but when I would go back, you know, you would sometimes be off for like 3 weeks. So I still needed to make money. And my relationships with those places, that's why they're so near and dear to my heart. The Georgia Theater, Chase Park Transduction Studios, they allowed me to come back and work like on my off time. I mean, tape machines don't just fix themselves. So even on my off time, even when I was going, you know, doing tours, I would still come back and just see what somebody had dropped off, what somebody had acquired, what needed to be fixed, and just go back into the shack in the back of the building and just start taking things apart and fix, trying to just make money where I could. And so when I was off a tour during 2016 and 2017, I was still doing that like basically engineering work of hardware, of fixing tape machines and fixing gear that like even records, even like record players, like old, Royal, like the Victrola, like the big ones with the horns. I think I went on a whole 2-day trip one time just trying to go to different manufacturing places that did like for custom machines, like machinery, and trying to get them to tell me, can we remake this part? Like, I really need it. I like, can we combine two? Like, how much is it going to cost? Like all these things, like, do you know something that could be this way? Or, maybe you need to rethread, sometimes often because I couldn't get the right screw thread, they don't make it anymore. How, determining how easy and how withstanding the brunt force to maybe just re-thread a screw to an old machine with a modern day screw standard or metric system, like that, that took time. So throughout all that, that's why I still kept the relationships with vendors and people from all over the world that were like on Reddit. They're like, we heard somebody in Georgia like fixes like stuff like that. And I'm just like, yeah, and they all think that my name's fake, because, and I promise you it's not, it's just, and I can't tell you how often when I settled the shows, like when I would give them my email, it's like, yes, no, it's not Bennett Moon because I work for Moon Taxi. I was born Bennett Moon, and that's my email.
Something that didn't dawn on me until I was looking over some notes you sent me, that your grandmother's maiden name,
all good.
Okay, was all good, but then the Bennett name,
oh yeah,
is from
Mississippi.
Your great grandmother, right?
Yes, yeah.
So in your history,
that's how I got it.
The Bennett line, but then I'm a Bennett, and I thought, well, we may be cousins.
And she was my grandmother was an genealogist, so we're going to dig into that a little bit more, Kenny, because I have a whole big book that she wrote about that, a tomb really, that traces that line. And I could spend some time with you, and I might even just give you a copy, and maybe we can figure out how
that'd be hilarious, wouldn't it?
Related we are. And
then your name Moon, I shared with Bennett, in communication that there was a Texas ranch that I grew up on. The woman who owned it, and the Alvin Bennett, his family homesteaded it, 2,000-acre ranch, and last name Moon. So all these things started to click, and I thought, well, we already have a vibe going. So that's cool. So you're advancing along, but then you showed.
That really the click is that. So 2017 hit, and Moon Taxi was also picking up, and we were doing Letterman. We were doing all the late night circuits. We were doing, Jimmy Kimmel. We were doing it. And at that same, and I will say that you ask like sometimes what for inspiration, and in 2017, I kind of had that moment where what should I do? Should I do more live touring, or should I finally capitalize on the clout that I had and try to make more rock and roll records, right? Or make records. It didn't have to be rock and roll. I kind of facetiously say rock and roll records. I have recorded orchestras, right? I have recorded classical. So not just rock and roll records. And I've done, actually Cicada Rhythm has an amazing Americana record as well. But the 2017 crux within me is that I really needed to know where I should direct my talents. At that point, I really had tapped into a lot. And I think at that point, I needed to see where to strengthen those lines within my own self and my own world, to see better where I could strengthen those talents instead of grow lots of talents. And so that crux happened. And I will always say that, and this is not just for females, but it is for so many people, that my career truly took off, is when I was being pulled so much for my managerial skills. Even when I was a very accomplished and capable engineer, it was so often where naturally people, even when it wasn't something I needed to do, like at that point, our crew had grown to be where like I didn't even need to do the merch anymore, but people just came to me within the venue. And I know that I hold a presence because I'm, a production manager. People saw that I knew things, but then less and less on the road, on touring, was I called upon for my engineering and more my people skills. So I was there to settle, I would be called upon to have, talks with band members, between band members. I was between management and band members, between, accountants and band members. I was being pulled, I'd say at that time, more and more about my managerial and my people skills than I was being called upon for my actual fingers on faders, bringing a guitar up or a piano down more. And that was kind of hard to swallow because I had done so much to be accomplished as an engineer. And that was something I was so proud about, being one of the only female engineers on the East Coast with all my accreditations. And I knew that it mattered, but I also was just stunned that people just wanted me there to be a people, more business in the music industry than anything, or to manage all of the production management. Is really, you're not doing engineering as either, but a lot of production managers are engineers at some point, because when you look at when you need to build a show, you're looking at a lot of gear, and you need to know what that gear is. You need to know the difference between, lighting, you need to know all the gear. You need to know lighting gear, automation gear, motors. You need to know weights. You need to know trusses. You need to know audio. You need to know speakers. You need to know so much. So I've been picking up and learning all that. And because actually our production manager he had a baby. So he may have been offsite doing it, but I was lucky enough, another chance that I didn't even plan for, is that because he went home to have the baby for 3 months, I was the on-site production person. So he got to build the sheets and I got to implement them. And then by the time I was done with it, I was building the sheets and implementing them because I was able to have learned that way. And so in 2017, it really was one of the biggest things that I can say in my career, of that moment where accepting and not fighting it, is that, and I hope anybody can take this to heart, is that my career took off when I finally realized what I was naturally good at, and I combined it and honored it with what I studied to be good at, because I was so much pushing down what I was naturally gifted at, which was people. I do not know why people like me. I'm so happy that they do, and I try to carry myself to be that. But even if people liked me when I was a hard, and I was a hardliner. How about that? Hardliner. I with a stern foot and a stern voice, but they still gravitated towards me, even in those instances when most people, I could be labeled as 1,000 different, words that they describe women that have, that walk into a room and, most of the time, it's 7 a.m. and we walk in and, all the guys are there, the hands, they're just, union workers, and, they're all kind of, and I just start saying, I'm like, hey, do you think, maybe this looks a little dusty and we're about to unload our trailer, unload our semi truck. Let's get a broom and clean this up so that we're not putting our gear on dirty ground. I get that the venue hasn't been used in a couple of days, but let's do that. And they just look at me and they're like, no, we're not, or they would, they just didn't react. And I introduced myself. I'm like, hey, I'm Bennett. I'm with the band. So do y'all have a broom that you could just start sweeping this? And, none of them would act. And I would realize oh man, they don't get it. They don't get it. They don't get that I'm at they thought I was the girlfriend of the band looking for the shower, right?
Yeah.
So then I'd have to back up and I'd be like, all right, let's start this again. Hi, I'm Bennett. I'm going to be the person that you're going to be listening to all day. So it's going to be a great day as long as we work well together. So let's start that right now. So let's make sure that this happens. I need a broom. I can do it myself if you get me the broom. I'd prefer you do it, but we don't have to, because I just need it done now. And like, and people would, get the picture. And I think that was really what happened when I realized, and as soon as I accepted that, as soon as I stopped fighting the roles that were being asked of me in the sort of managerial way, and gave up being like, no, if I'm not the person that's making the sound in here, and like, then I'm just going to go back to being thought of as like somebody that needs to, go be thought of as the girlfriend of the band, which, it is just not a good place to feel. And
so what I hear, there was a cartoon, just a few panes of a cartoon, and there was like a cat and a dog, and in the middle was a duck, and the dog looks at the duck and says, "Rough, rough." Have you seen that? And then the duck looks at the cat and says, "Meow, meow."
Yeah.
And then the cat answers, "Meow, meow." And then he looks at the dog and says, "Rough, rough." Yep. So the gift of translating, and I'm so pumped up and inspired by the fact that, so where you are at this point in your career back in 16, 17 is you have the expertise coupled with what's being placed on you because you're a natural at it, but you have the skill set that you can walk into a room and you can immediately tell what's wrong or what's right. Mm-hmm. And but then also you possess the skill set to be able to address it, or to know if the person you're depending on to address it is not doing it properly. Mm-hmm. And so it gives you a lot of strength and a lot of power, and gives you leverage to get the job done, which is, paramount in any of this. And because things are so expensive. So to me, what a fascinating story of, there wasn't like this outset to where you sit down and you write the legal pad and here's everything I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. But I think also something that you brought out that's really inspirational. And I've seen this theme in other people that, that have been on the show, is this moment where you say, I can do that. I'm willing to do that. Even back when you went back home to, at that time, Athens, Georgia, and you just started making yourself available to pick up work, to add to your income. And compared to where you'd been, I mean, you've been in Austria, one of the most beautiful places on the planet. And then you're back in Athens, Georgia. Not that it's not a beautiful place, but you know what I'm saying, to where you're fixing a reel-to-reel audio recording machine. So that's cool. And I think we can all benefit from that. And you have a can-do attitude is what I'm hearing. So pick up from there. Yeah.
I mean, that can do. It's like the moment, here's a shout out to, another, more maybe geared toward to females, but really to anybody, is that the moment that you think that somebody and that you're too good to do something is the moment that you lost out being good at it. And I don't know how else to say it. Like, you can be good at cleaning a toilet and it actually matters. Like, you just don't know how things actually can show up in your life that is benefited. Like, I remember I walked into a venue and the toilet was just awful. Like, it just was, I mean, I didn't want the people I cared about using it. And I just I knew I had passed the broom closet down, like walking to the green room. So just go around the corner, get the stuff, spray that thing down, wipe it all clean, move on with it, But then, somebody comes in there and they're just like, the venue manager, and they're just like, wow, like, I was actually coming to clean that. Y'all showed up early. So sorry that it wasn't clean, and apologizing to me. And I'm like, hey, it doesn't matter. It's fine. I took care of it. It's not a big deal. No worries. I appreciate you trying to take care of it, but I just did it. And that thought, again, I was the most high, I was the highest person of authority in that building at the time. And I didn't care. I didn't care that it needed to get done. And I didn't make a big deal out of it. It made, and it shouldn't have been a big deal. But the venue manager, the promoter of that show, happened to be working for AEG. And AEG is, up there with Live Nation as the largest promoter of shows and festivals and of tours in the whole nation and of the world, really. And they, that same promoter remembered me because I had not made a big deal about it. And I had done it myself. And I got actually that same promoter hired me on my off time to do the VMAs, to be just a promoter liaison, literally just a person between the promoter and the artists for the MTV Music Awards, CMAs, the Video Music Awards. I mean, that's how little, I'm not saying, I don't want to be as cliche as like, oh, I cleaned a toilet and I got a bigger gig. I was already in a good gig. I was already up there. I just did that. And, the guy was like, hey, I saw that y'all are not going to be on tour for a little bit. I actually need some help. Would you want to come to work during your off time? And I've got like the Super Bowl, like Ariana Grande's Super Bowl performance. I ended up working that and being one of the promoter and production liaisons between the event and the management. And so that's, it is as simple. I'm sure that there was other things and factors besides, but the moment that first interaction with me and that person was that we arrived early. We were 2 hours early. So I give it to them that the toilet wasn't clean, right? Like they would have had time to clean it, but I needed to start work and it was 7 a.m. and I wanted to get in there and I cleaned the toilet. And it was that interaction that made the road and the platform for that, those kinds of respects between people, between somebody that's like a 50-year-old promoter and me in my mid-20s as just a band manager or band, engineer and manager and road person, that made me be able to climb.
Well, let me ask you something that's kind of germinating in my brain is I've talked to both my sons have music business degrees. My oldest one's working in the music industry. And, I'm sure you've seen the documentary Sound City, done by Dave Grohl, and really it's the story of the Neve console. Mm-hmm. But in the midst of telling the story of the Neve console, which if you don't know what that is, look it up. But Neve is a guy I think he's out of England.
Rupert Neve, he died broke.
Oh, did he really?
He died. I don't know how broke, but he hated what he, it's a really interesting story for the listeners. Definitely look up Rupert Neve. He was, to this day, one of the preamps that he developed for Sony. The preamps and these huge boards, they are still some of the original ones. They are still some of the most sought after pieces ever in the music industry. And there are, I bet you, 100 different apps or like plugins on Pro Tools that just try and fail at trying to get what Rupert Neve was able to preamp, equal EQ and parametric EQ. So, but watching that documentary and the fact that as digital came on board, they talked about the guy, Dave Grohl brings out the fact that there was a guy just literally, I think not too far away, that opened up a news shop and he had a computer and he began to draw away business from Sound City. They ended up closing the doors. That's when Grohl was able to, he didn't think he was going to be able to get the board that it was probably going to go to somebody much even bigger than Grohl. But something that stood out to me is that when you see the photographs of the venue, it was kind of run down. And yet all the albums I grew up listening to as a teenager, a lot of them were recorded there, Fleetwood Mac Rumors and, those kind of acts. And that thousands of songs that went to number one. And something that fascinates me, Bennett, is that what I think that Sound City missed and they let the digital take away is they had an enclave. And even though that company, they didn't own any artists, so to speak, there was nobody in their artist stable. I don't know what term you use today, but everybody wanted to be there because of the ambiance, the camaraderie, the community. And so Sound City, in a very real way, was a community that people connected to. That's what Muscle Shoals is to this day.
Right. But what I'm hearing from you, and maybe, I don't think I'm speaking anything that you don't already know or think, but I'm saying when I listen to your energy and to hear your knowledge and your skill sets, and then we've been blessed to have come to Spring Hill, and then the stuff that I didn't know about y'all even providing places for artists to have things that, are important to them. They don't want to put down at the used store, that you are providing that type of connection that I'd think it would be amazing to see where you are to become an enclave, to where it's like a hub.
Yeah.
And maybe that's already how it's in your purpose statement or whatever, but that sense of hub and community is missing because of the fact what you talked about. My son, he has a recording studio at home, the John Smith, who is his mentor. And, he still works with John all the time, but John just built a new studio at his house. But there's something to be said about an enclave. I don't even know if that's a word I'm looking for. You know what I'm saying? To where
absolutely, it's community, enclave, camaraderie, all of it.
But do you see? I mean, I don't want to superimpose that, but to me, it sounds like that's what y'all are shooting for.
100%.
And so, to me, man, that could be huge. That is huge from a standpoint of industry survival, industry thrive. Both, video and audio, because to me, that artists are looking for that connection.
Yeah.
And like you said, they can go to 1,000 different recording studios that have, 2 preamps and, $1 million worth of gear, but something they can't get is Bennett Moon. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Or just that and access, and people. I mean, people are, and I love that is how it is for me. And then there's certain, like you ask the, biologist, and it's not that I don't love plants and nature and all of that. Before the show started, we talked about our activism and, conservation activity or, loves and passions. But, if I was to choose, some of the richest things that this world and this universe has, and it is the people within it. And it goes back to I'm not just a people person. It's people. I thoroughly enjoy what makes us all different, and also love to discover what makes us all click, or in a version in between that. I can't ever know what I'm not naive enough to know that I could scratch the surface on meeting or just knowing somebody. But my grandmother told me, and I'll say this, that it imprinted on me from when I was 6 years old. And she just said, Bennett, you mustn't ever meet anyone. You must always strive for meaningful acquaintances. And while you strive for that, the world will infinitely broaden and feel small as in a good community all at the same time. And it's true. If you don't go about just saying I met that person. But if you actually strive, it's more than just and believe me, names are hard, I'll stumble over a name any day, but I'll never forget a face, and I'll never forget an experience or something that connects on that level. So a meaningful acquaintance over meeting somebody is always what I put down and put forth on my daily in life. And that has been a treasure to how I operate and hold myself accountable to those that count on me.
Now, so you did work with Jack White both for a solo career.
Yeah.
And let me say,
I promise we're right there. Just that launch is now 2018 is when I started working with Jack.
Okay. But also let me say, and I don't need to pull the list out, Bennett could give us the sheet, but she's worked with a multitude of world renowned recording artists. And also traveled the world.
Video's gone real.
My video's gone bad?
Well, it's there, but it's real.
It may be a latency. Now, what I'm seeing on my screen, hang on just a minute. What I'm seeing on my screen is, okay, so I hope what Google's getting to the cloud is not distorted, because I can see you clearly. I can see myself.
I can hear and see you just
fine.
Oh,
you can see me clear? Okay, so maybe it's just your computer. But thank you, producer.
If we need to recalibrate, I'm fine.
No, that's fine. But anyway, so yeah, we'll pick back up, because you distorted a little bit when you're telling what your grandmother shared with you. I want that to come through clearly.
Yeah.
And then we'll pick back up, and then I'll back up out of the way, and we can edit this all out of here. But I do want to. I'll leave the part. I'll edit it so that because people need to understand. I'm not tooting your horn, so to speak, but that you've worked with a lot of people by this time. Okay, so go ahead. Tell me the story, about what your grandmother said when you were 6.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes, I think I was speaking more about that opportunity in 2017 that I had an opportunity on off the tours to work for like the VMAs, MTV Music Awards, CMT Awards, and Super Bowl performances. And those experiences really had gone from not me. I wasn't actually the engineer putting those images of the artist or the sound through the speakers for those large events, because those roles were filled by vendors, by people that had been doing it. But what I was able to do when I came in was bringing what I had learned and what I had known and how I knew how to speak to different crew members. Being the production manager, you have crew chiefs, audio crew chiefs, you have your lighting crew chiefs, and you have to, and it's a big, it's a bottleneck. It's a tree, it's a root system. You have you and a tour manager and the production manager, and then promoters, and then you go out to your crew chiefs, and then you trickle down for like 100 people. But, back to what made a real difference and what I had to pull from my childhood. When I spoke about in 2017, I realized I needed to figure out how to combine what I was naturally good at, what people were offering me more money. They were offering me way more money to production manage than they were to engineer, way more money. But my soul was like, oh, this is what my dream was. I'm going to be, the best female engineer, whatever it is in the world. And it wasn't a give up on a dream at all. And that's what I wanted to be so important. It wasn't a give up on it. I have the opportunity. I could, who knows? I hope my life is long that I can still have dreams I don't even know I have yet to make. But either way, that moment where I realized that what I was naturally gifted at, combine it with what I studied and went into debt and struggled with, and combining those, that was when my career shot off. And because of that, I pulled from my childhood what my grandmother always said. And that goes into part of, I enjoy people and I work well with them. And I think it's something that you cannot study to be. It is just a natural gift. I don't know why people gravitate to it, but I have to honor it. And it's a silly way to say a people person. That's why I try to reword it. But she told me, she said, Bennett, you mustn't ever go through life meeting anyone. You must strive to make meaningful acquaintances, and then the world shall be both large and small at the same time. And that's really important that I'm bad with names sometimes. Everybody is, but I won't ever forget a person, and I'll definitely remember, the interaction and whatnot, and we'll figure out the names after that, right? But it's striving to make, if you strive and go into something that you're not just like, oh, it's like these big award parties, right? You're going to meet 1,000 people. So you get over, there are people that get overwhelmed, and that's okay. It's okay. But for me, knowing and pep talking oneself before going into that, it's like, no, I'm not meeting these people. I'm not meeting them. I'm going to make some meaningful, I'm not meeting them. I am going to make meaningful acquaintances, and making that a reality only oneself can do. You can't go to school for that. You can't be taught that. No one can hold your hand through that. You as a person have to make those connections. Just like Kenny, you reached out to me and you were lovely from the bat. I didn't know anything about what you had going on, but because of your proprietary, emotions, right? Like that clicked, and that's what you put off. That's your meaningful acquaintance, is immediately making it meaningful for the other person, AKA me, that I hadn't heard, and is humble enough to be like, oh, I don't know who wants to hear me talk for any time, but your meaningfulness with what you're passionate about spoke through without you needing to do much. And I was on board. And that can be copy and pasted it throughout anybody's career, not just you or me, but it's about making meaningful acquaintances or meaningful motions in one's life.
Well, so then you already have some connection with Jack White,
yeah,
which I both respect. So tell me about that among all of the musical artists and stars, and however you want to say it, people that are being successful. How did that click, and what was your or has been your involvement there?
So, end of 2017, I had worked in, I had really, 2017 was an amazing year for me to make connections with people, not just like crew, but everywhere in the industry. And there is an awesome entertainment lawyer in Atlanta named Matt Wilson. And he spoke at a ton of like South by Southwest panels about entertainment lawyers, right? Like that's a big thing. Like, hey, like there's people, nerds like me. And then there's other people in the music industry, like lawyers that are making it so that artists still can pay their bills. So love those entertainment lawyers. His name's Matt Wilson. And Matt Wilson and I had been on a panel together about something, and we had known each other. And also I had done work for him in other ways through his artists and that he was representing. And he called me and he was like, I know you're with Moon Taxi. I know you've got all these other things. What are you looking to do for the next couple of years? And I kind of just was like, I don't know. Like, he's like, do you think that you're ready to go on an international tour? And I was like, I suppose I could be. And it was really hush hush. It was like, he said, well, I'm going to connect you with a production manager. And that guy's name is also, I mean, I owe him so much. Kit Blanchard is his name. And he is based out of Atlanta. And this man had done Jack's 2014 Lazaretto tour. But Kit had also he's been in the industry for so long. He, a great dad and a great husband, but also did Jack Johnson's world tour, LCD Sound System. I mean, an incredible career and resume. And he had been hired again to do Jack's solo tour. So Jack usually does a major solo tour every 4 years. So you had 2011, then you had 2014 Lazaretto, and that was really Jack's first, big solo set. And then 2018 came along, and you have Boarding House Reach. But nobody knew that at that time. Nobody knew. And it was just Matt Wilson, the lawyer, said, I'm going to connect you. Will you have lunch with this guy that's a production manager in Atlanta? He's looking for a production coordinator, which is when you get 100 people on a tour, it's too much for two people, the production manager and the tour manager, to do. So there's a position called a production coordinator. And that is like the two realms, the tour side, the production side, the venues. They need a liaison in the middle within the team. And then that person sources out the crew, the vendors, the audio, the lighting, and everything. So this production manager, Kit Blanchard, he and I have lunch, and he can't, like, the whole lunch. It is, I have no idea who he already said, I'm not really interested. He's like, I'm not really allowed to tell you who it is, but I just wanted to, he asked me questions, asked me some of the things, asked me what and just how, because he and I would be running the tour of like 100+ people all over the world. And so we had to vibe. There's a 35-year age difference between us, all that. And we clicked immediately. And I mean, I remember driving home after that, and like this is how silly it was. I had hugged him because I thought he was going in for a hug. Like literally, I thought I had blown the interview because he actually was going to get something. It was like that classic movie scene. And I don't think I'd even ever had that happen. But I remember calling my mom or something like that and being like, oh, I'm totally not going to get this gig. I thought he was hugging me goodbye, which would have been fine. And I went in for the hug, but he was actually bending down to get something. And I just thought it was. And so we awkwardly hugged, and I was like, oh, well, this is never going to happen. And sure enough, he called me the next day, and he said, I'd like to offer you the position. And after I signed the paperwork, he said, it's going to be Jack White's solo tour. And we went everywhere from Russia to South America to Australia, Japan, Asia. I mean, yeah, I went to Moscow, I actually went ahead a week. I actually did 7 days in Moscow with like 4 of my best crew guys before the tour even started, because, well, why not? We already had the visas. We already had the things. And so, I don't think I hope that my own children might be able to go visit Russia someday after everything's said and done, or after everything, hopefully. But I look at it now and I'm like, I may never in my lifetime be able to go back to Russia. Who knows? And I was able to do that. And it's just an amazing opportunity. This Jack White guy recognized my name after the production manager had met me and was like, I know that name. Cause Jack has like a thing about colors, like all of his solo tours, all black, blue. Obviously the White Stripes was all white and red. His raconteur stuff is all green, copper, gold, or not gold, but green and copper and orange. And then all of the Dead Weather stuff, which is the other project he has, is all yellow and black. And he's such an artist that it is incredible on how he has themes. And technically, because my last name is Moon, and if you look at Lazaretto's tour and you look at the album artwork from 2014's Lazaretto, it's him in a graveyard and there's a big moon above it. And if you look at the YouTube videos on any of like the shows, they carried around a huge, I mean, this was before my time, they carried around a huge moon as a set piece every show. And so the fact that like, I remember when we finally did meet, Jack and I face to face, he said, I think the first thing he said, so you're Bennett Moon. So you're going to be the moon that I haven't had as of yet. And I hope you're going to make sure that you look out for us. And I go, you can count on it.
That, I tell you, that is amazing. And wow, what a tribute to you that they put that kind of trust in you, saw that type of potential skill sets in you. And
I had to learn a lot. Well, man, I can tell you, I winged some things. Man, I remember one time I got my phone stolen literally out of my pocket, just trying to keep the crowds from rushing Jack. I had all my radios here, right? Like, I have like a big tactical vest. I have to have like tons of radios. And I guess just in the heat of everything, my pocket was there and I had my phone stolen out of my pocket.
Now, where was that?
That was in Paris.
Well, that sounds like Paris. I mean,
I know, but it was one of those things.
I've never been there, but one thing, my dad was a world traveler, and he actually got connected when he was in France with real gypsies. And my son, when he was young, my dad was sitting at the table one night telling him about the night that he danced with the gypsies, the real gypsies, not
the Romanian ones. Like
yes, but they're very good at pickpocketing. But
yeah.
So y'all were performing in Paris, I guess, right?
Yeah, at the La Olympia, which is one of the most historic venues in Europe. I mean, it's older. It is on the site of like one of the Roman Colosseums. But it's an incredible venue. And the way that, sometimes with Jack, like we would play, 30,000 plus venues, right? But then we'd also, because he really, I know, it's not that no one needs to defend Jack White because it speaks for himself, but in some ways I find myself in that protection mode of like, because he is so particular and some people think that he can come off as like, and he's so funny. So his dry humor can also be sarcastic, but anyway, he has a very particular way that if like a promoter or a venue like offered him and Meg White in the White Stripes back in the 90s, right? When it was a 2-piece band. Nobody'd heard of these young 19-year-olds out of Detroit and nobody cared to. How can you put on a show with a chick on drums and a dude on guitar? But like that was
all the college bands now. That's their.
Oh, not just college. It's like
right.
It's FIFA. FIFA, worldwide. That's their theme song. But now it's like up there with Queen. We Will Rock You. It's just what as like a monumental sports arena humming song. But Jack, it is so particular, and what he did do, and a lot of people would be like, why is Jack playing at that venue? Because it's smaller. And it's almost like people get mad because he picked a venue that was smaller than like what he really could have sold out. But it all depends on like, he will always go back to somebody that gave him a chance during the White Stripes. And even if I remember hearing some of these guys in the room when we were settling shows, like saying like, man, if we didn't have this show this year, I don't think we would have been able to clear into the green, like just because with the way that, since the time of White Stripes to where Jack is now, they'd been sourced out. Like these promoters were just losing their business. They aren't able to keep up with Live Nation and AEG, and these small city promoters, like there was a place in Cleveland, like this guy was struggling so much because he can't compete with Ticketmaster. It's just like the all-in 360 deals of ticket sales, concessions, all of that. I mean, he was priced out, and Jack chose out of the way in the harder way. And he went and worked with that promoter and gave that promoter the business, because that promoter gave him and Meg White a chance when nobody else would give him a single spot to play in Cleveland. And that guy did. And Jack gave it right back to him.
Now, but then you also worked with one of his
raconteurs.
Yeah, what would you call it? Not emanations, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
One of his personas in the raconteur.
Yeah, the iteration.
So what was your role there with the raconteurs?
Same thing. Production manager. Yeah. Well, production coordinator. And really it was a lot of the same crew from his solo tour, because he went right in from 2018 to 2019 and we wrapped up. Our last show was like January or 2020, like right before 2020. And then, so we did almost 4 years of touring, basically, just from the way that, you would take, Jack, everybody needs a break. Like Jack is singing, all of those songs for hours on end, and he has no set lists either. I love that. It's amazing. I've worked with some amazing, talented people, and I don't know anybody that has a discography as deep as Jack's that does not do a set list ever. How he's able to not repeat a song in one night after playing 9 shows in a row, and just know that, nope, I'm not going to play that one song that I always play at some point in the show, but I'm going to play it in the beginning this time. And I'm going to play it at the end and this time, and then not get confused which time he did it, and the band. And I have to give the credit to, his band members. For at least for his solo stuff, it's always Dominic Davis is on bass, and Dominic and him grew up in Detroit together.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And Dominic Davis is a local, he's obviously from Michigan, but him and his wife, Rachel, are also in their own rights musicians here. They live in Nashville. Dominic actually has been playing bass for Jason Isbell. But Dominic and Jack, at age 10 years old, started playing in their garage together. So it takes a lot of Jack's band to also understand his cues. And like Jack is always turns around. There's a separate mic that's not through the PA system that he goes to talk on, just that's going straight into the ears of everybody on stage and us crew for what he wants played. If everyone on stage, which his band is so talented, already should know what he wants played because of what the strings and the motions that he's playing. But he also will go into it being like, hey, we're going to play this, and then I'm going to quickly go into this. And he'll say that really fast, and he'll make it like nobody is the wiser out in the crowd. Like nobody will know that he's just had like a 3-second conversation with everybody, that what's going to happen. And then he explodes into it, and everyone's having the best night of their life and seeing the best show of their entire lifetime. And I will tell you that every day it was so. I worked 80, 90 hours a week. It was sometimes. You're loading out. It's 11 semi trucks. It's, you're going to the next city. I have to, most of the time it's me. You need to be on the ground until the last truck doors close, because I'm sending the paperwork with every truck driver for like the tolls. Like if we're going over a border, it's the manifest, the cartage. And then we're getting up and going to 6:30 and loading in again. And it is a lot of work. But the cup of coffee that I didn't ingest every night, and I will tell you this, is when I go around and put the like stage towels and waters where they need to be on stage. That was one thing that I did. Never entrusted anybody with it. That was always me. That was like my connect of like making sure that the band members were taken care of. And, and it's just when you walk out on stage, and like there was one festival in Europe, it's in Belgium. It's called Rock Werchter. Werchter is like WERCTER. But anyway, it's a place in Belgium, and it's one of Europe's largest festival. So we were in front of 80 to 100,000 people. And there is nothing that is quite like the whites of those people's eyes of 100,000 people just always looking at whoever walks on stage. It wasn't just, I mean, it was me, but, anybody's going to be like, oh, is that them? Is that the band? But I mean, all of those people there and had been there for hours, standing in the heat, the rain, whatever it is, to see, hopefully, the best night of music of their entire lives. And it is such a huge honor to do that. And it's so precious to know how important every bit, from the waters to making sure that the stuff above your head is not going to come crashing down. All of those are so important, and all of those have to be done to have that moment for those people out in the crowd to see the best night of music that they've ever seen in their life. And you'll get, it's the best cup of coffee, no matter how tired I am. If I can walk out on stage before a show is about to start, I won't need coffee for the rest of the night. It's that impactful and that's special.
You mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that you had been out of town doing some work. And I'm curious that in your relationship with Worldwide Stages here in Spring Hill, are you heavily, can you still have some mobility to do things, or, what's your, where are you now as far as in all of that?
Yeah, great question too, because that would make sense. After the 2 years that it really took to turn over that building, to get it as it is now, that it can take any kind of production that it needs, that needs to come in. And I have trained and put in place, the boots on the ground, right? Boots on the ground that I feel like I can, and also with just systems, right? Like at this point, I should have, that's enough time to know what it's like when you advance a show or advance a production, what they need, and to disseminate that information to the people that I have trusted and trained through the hard times and the not on how to make that facility function. So those people are able to take what I, do or what they can also pick up and advance, and take as of the production. And those people, depending on how high level it is, I've worked all the CMT stuff and all that, but like some of the little stuff, like just a music video here and there or commercial or whatnot, those people that are there that, I chose about, I don't know how long ago it was, but I did, after I got it up and running, I got a little, after I got it all where it needed to be, I personally wanted, after the pandemic and all of that, I had been saying no to a lot of projects. And once I finally got it to where it was, I had the ability to say, maybe I'm not full-time all this time. I can go and do this, and, we can figure out how that works, but I won't ever leave them hanging, right? I will be there for everything that they need, but I also have the ability to take on some other projects, passion projects, that I'm very, very blessed to do. And so more recently, full circle here, I'm glad you asked, full circle, even with Worldwide, I was doing so much, both literally connecting cables, but also being in a boardroom talking about how millions of dollars should be, to be funded, or like how much things will cost, from like the couch in the lobby that has nothing to do with the production spaces or really me, but like how the budgets go and like all that stuff. And I looked around the room and there was enough people there that I felt that this place that I'm so passionate about was in good hands. And I needed to do some things of my own. I lost my dad, during the pandemic, and there was some things that I wanted to do that I promised him I'd do. To go, see some things and, for personal reasons. And I was able and have been able to do that. But mostly I've been working for M3 Technology, which is a company out of Nashville that builds audiovisual. I'll send you the link too for it. So if anybody is looking for a vendor of, both just anything that has to, any like corporate or studio, right? Like if you need speakers in place, if you're if you're looking to put Crestron, which is like basically a high-tech Google Meets in these boardrooms, then somebody needs to be in there to install the speakers in the ceiling and do these huge system, basically cabinets, right? Patch bays of like how from the data cables, the Cat 6s and the Cat 5s come through the ceiling, and then they go into these data closets, and then how we pull those into these big power supplies that will keep basically the company running. And all it's very technical, and I missed doing some of that. And so that was the gig that I did at the beginning, and I have been doing several gigs for them. And it's really just back to my roots. It is just pure, I don't deal with people. I am just, I put on my tactical vest. I put on, I get my rubber sole steel-toed boots. I get all my tools on me, and I just look at a big schematic and all of the different tie lines, and I just start cutting into walls with a jigsaw, and we start running cables, and then we leave it to another construction crew to patch it back up.
Well, I know we need to be careful maybe if I ask this, but do you see yourself, would you ever go back on the road again?
I'm still close with all the third man. And I yeah, for Jack, I hands down do it. And luckily when I took the job at Worldwide, we talked like he was going out to do, the supply chain tour. And that happened in 2021 and 2022. And, I had already accepted my position. I waited out, and, I was too involved with knowing that I needed to be at Worldwide, because not only did I love what the vision was and know it was so important, but my grandmother was on the Murray County business development board that sealed the deal with GM in 1985 for that plant. So, it was like, this is trickling down. Why else would I have, been?
Well, there you go.
Exactly. To be a part of bringing this big monolith of a building that had just been going into decay, to bring it into something where it's not just going to be torn down and leveled, it's preserved. It's brought it to its new life form. And so I did have to say no one time. But honestly, Jack understood completely. And I knew I needed to do that then. So yeah, I would totally go back out on tour if it's for the right, for the passion that I would see. And then, there's so much that is out there that, I'm excited about what is to come.
Well, I tell you what, there could be a whole series of conversations with Bennett Moon. Cause even talking about, working with 100,000 people and just the logistics of that, the mentality of that, that in itself could be, an hour show. So, hopefully at some point we can come back around and do this again. But I tell you, Bennett, I for some reason, the Lord let me know from the beginning that it was going to be a cool ride talking to Bennett Moon, and it has been a thrill. And so I want to thank you so much for being on the show, and look forward to hearing people's responses. And I'm praying, for the inspiration to all people who are looking to move forward in things that they're passionate about. And there's so many naysayers and so many people to shoot down our visions and our dreams. And yet I've been super inspired personally from your story. And so thank you so much for being on Other Things with Bennett Moon.
Thank you so much for having me. And it has been an honor and a pleasure.